Number 1.
This happened about a year ago. I work at a pet store where we adopt cats from local shelters. They aren't our cats. We are intermediaries to help them get seen and adopted. We follow the interview and application process set by the various shelters in order to determine whether or not to adopt to a person. The application process often includes contacting the landlord to ensure that it's fine that the person has a cat on their property. One afternoon, a young man came into the store, maybe in his mid to late 20s, and walked back to our adoption center. He was thin, maybe a little dirty looking, but there was nothing too remarkable about his appearance. When he reached the cats, without even looking at them, he turned to my manager and said, "I'll take that one and that one." He pointed at Fluffers and Delmonico, a cat and a kitten from 2 different shelters located in 2 different cages. Fluffers clearly had a sign on her cage saying she was approved for adoption, so my manager said, well, Fluffers is spoken for, but we can have you visit with Delmonico." She went into the little visitation room with the guy, and I walked away. Glad I had dodged the bullet of helping out that particular guy. He had just rubbed me the wrong way. A few minutes later, my manager came to get me. She asked me to go talk to the guy to see what I thought because, in her words, he just seemed a little off. We take the responsibility of making sure our cats go to the good homes very seriously, but I sighed and agreed. When I went into the little visitation room, the guy was sitting on the bench with Delmonico clutched in his arms, just staring at the wall. The kitten was squirming a lot. He seemed okay, but he really didn't seem to want to be held by this guy. I introduced myself and asked if he was interested in adopting Delmonico. The guy said yes, he would take him. There's a 2-page application to fill out before you can be approved, and if you rent, we'll need your landlord's number so we can make sure it's okay that you adopt, I said. He didn't say anything. I asked him if he wanted the application, and he just questioned, "What application?" He was still holding the kitten, who clearly wanted away from him, and he turned to look at me, and I saw his pupils were huge and black, his irises barely visible. I noticed that his leg was twitching, and twitching like he could barely sit still. I felt my palms get sweaty, and I explained the application process again, adding that it could take 24 to 72 hours to process everything. He focused on me and said, "I can't take him today." Wanting the kitten out of his arms, I told him, "Well, let's get you to fill out this application and we'll see what we can do." "Jesus fucking Christ, okay, give me the goddamn paper," he said. I wordlessly handed him a clipboard with the application on it. He let go of Delmonico, who I immediately scooped up. I could feel the guy's heat on the kitten's fur, which severely disturbed me for some reason. I clutched the kitten to my chest and waited for him to be done, since other than the one outburst, he had been mostly polite, and my retail training wouldn't yet allow me to ask him to leave. I tried hurrying him up and told him that if we could just get him to fill out this application, we could really get the ball rolling on this whole thing. He questioned why we needed this information. I tried telling him that it's just what the shelter requires. He started writing fuck in all the spaces on the application. "This is bullshit. This system is bullshit. All the cats will die without getting adopted with this system," he said. I had a pretty good rush of adrenaline going at this point, but my inherently polite retail persona still wouldn't let me ask him to leave. So instead, I told him that we typically find homes for about a dozen homeless cats each week using the applications. He stared at me and put his hands on the sides of his head. He rocked back and forth, and for a moment, he stared at me and put his hands on the sides of his head. He rocked back and forth for a moment, and then met my eyes and said, very clearly, "You have a mind like a Babylonian orgasm. I'm leaving." For a second, I felt like maybe I was the crazy one, like maybe that sentence made sense, and I was simply unable to understand it. As I ran it through my head, trying to figure out what he meant, he got up, slammed the door to the visitation room, and stomped out of the store. Delmonico was unharmed, and as I put him back in his kennel, my manager approached me, her eyes wide. I showed the application on which the word fuck appeared numerous times, and I told her, I don't think we should adopt to him. I still couldn't figure out what the hell was wrong with that guy. Number 2. I'm from a small town in the Appalachia with a population of less than 7,000. There were about 80 people in my high school class, and people are generally very trusting. The story took place early last September, so it would have been a little less than a year ago. I was a 20-year-old male at the time and had just entered my junior year of college, about 3 hours from my hometown. In high school, I had a lot of close friends. There were about 8 of us who were very close. As things go, things changed when we went to respective colleges. I fell out of touch with many of them, but I did retain contact with a few. The ones featured in this story are Mac and Devin. Last September, I got a call from my mother telling me the news. Devin's father had been killed in an accident on his way to work. It was a sudden, brutal collision involving a semi. Devin's family was not from the area. They had moved to my town during high school because her father had gotten a job there. Having no family and a dispersed set of friends, she didn't have many people to lean on during this time. Mac contacted me and wanted to know whether I planned on attending the funeral, which had been planned for Friday morning. I had an important class Friday afternoon, but I told him that I would come up that evening and we could occupy Devin. Mac made the 6-hour drive from his college to attend the funeral, and I made it into the town later that evening. We decided that the 3 of us would spend a few hours at Mac's house. We were just going to hang out, and Mac and I were determined to preoccupy Devin. I got there around 6, and we jumped right into it. We talked about college, we watched some Netflix, we played board games. Despite the circumstances, it was a pretty good night. I got up to leave about a half hour after midnight. After some tearful goodbyes, I got in my car. Mac's house is a little more than a mile from my parents' house. There are no red lights and 1 stop sign. At the time of night, I could make the trip in less than 2 minutes. Being in a rural part of Appalachia, though, being in a rural part of Appalachia, though, the roads were far from straight. In fact, Mac's house was just off of a winding 2-lane road. There were several blind curves that stop you from seeing what's coming up ahead, and there were no guardrails or streetlights to speak of. So I started off on what I thought would be a brief, uneventful journey home. I pulled out of the driveway and I started on my way. I start into the first blind curve and I'm greeted by something entirely unexpected. I see a car. It's a white, older model sedan. It's half in my lane and half in the culvert. I have to quickly swerve to avoid hitting it, and I notice a figure waving his arms as I slam on the brakes. I end up stopped on the side of the road. There's no shoulder, so my car is sitting on the road and in the grass about 100 feet past his car. At this point, I should have kept going and called the police for help when I got home, but that's not what I did. I avoided that feeling in my gut, put my car in park, and opened my door. I stepped outside and immediately noticed the damage to the vehicle. The front end had serious damage. There were no other cars around, so I conclude the driver must have collided with the cliffside on the other side of the road. It's really dark though, so I have a hard time figuring out what happened. By the red light emitted from the taillight, I see the figure approaching me. "Hey buddy, I need some help." "What happened? Is there someone you'd like me to call?" "No, I tried to call my brother, but he didn't answer. He lives just up the road." "Oh, do you want me to call the police?"
"No, you can't call the police. I just need my car pulled out of here."
He points to the culvert.
"I need someone with a truck. My brother has one."
He's walking closer to me, and I'm beginning to make out some of his features. He's a little shorter than me, but he easily has 75 pounds on me. At this point, the little light left me unable to discern much else, except that he was wearing a baseball cap. "Well, I don't have a truck, so I guess I can't help you." I was beginning to feel very uncomfortable. He kept approaching me, and there was something wrong in his voice. A flatness, like he was not emotional at all about the predicament he was in. I started to walk backwards towards my car door.
"Drive me to my brother's house. He lives just up the road."
He points to the opposite direction of my home as he walks towards my passenger side. I have to get home. My family's expecting me. I convincingly lied to the man.
"It'll just take a minute. He lives right there. His house is only a mile away."
He kept progressing. My heart was racing. In this strange predicament I found myself in, my heart was racing. I wanted to get the hell out of there, but there isn't an ideal way to do it. My car doors are locked and he was getting very close to my car. Being as fast as possible, I couldn't get in and lock the door before he opened the other one and got in. I certainly didn't have enough time to put it in drive and pull away before he put at least some of himself in my passenger seat. Seeing as how he was going to get in my car if he wanted to, I decided to go the cordial route. If this was going to happen, it was going to happen on my terms. I knew the road he was talking about. My sister's boyfriend lived there, and I knew that it was less than a mile from where I currently sat. It was a one-lane holler, as we colloquially referred to a hollow. Maybe he was telling the truth. Maybe I was about to do a good deed. "Alright, get in." He sat down in my passenger seat about the time I make it into my driver's seat. Since the doors were open, my car's interior lights were on. This was the first good look I had at him. He was older than me, probably in his late 40s. He was dirty, very dirty. His hands were greasy, his shirt was full of holes, and there was literally flies congregating around him. My car instantly smelled like body odor and bodily fluids. I experienced immediate regret. This was a horrible idea. My parents had taught me about this. My mother was a true crime junkie, and she would always warn about situations like this. He closed the door and the lights went out. I made a U-turn and started heading toward his road. He insists on talking to me, although I would much prefer the hum of the radio. He asked me my name, where I live, and what I do. I evaded every question I deemed too personal, for I didn't want him to know too much about me. I begin to get the distinct feeling that something is wrong with him. He speaks void of emotion or any kind of inflection. Sometimes he has a hard time getting the words out. I conclude he's either on a mind-altering substance or he's playing with a less than full deck of cards. We were turning onto his brother's road when he began admiring my car. It's a fairly nice foreign car that my parents bought me for my 16th birthday. He's rubbing my dashboard with his greasy hand before he starts pressing buttons, both on the car and deep in my psyche.
"This is a nice car. A really nice car. I'd kill to have a car like this."
I kid you not, he literally said he would kill for my car. I didn't immediately take it as a threat, as there was absolutely no emotion in that statement, and it was a common turn of phrase. Nevertheless, I was getting very uncomfortable. My sister's boyfriend's house is just barely in sight. I'm so worked up that I decide I'm going to stop there. I'm pretty sure I could get a few beats in on the door before this guy attacks me for not taking him to his brother's place. As I approach the driveway, my heart sinks. There are no cars there, and there isn't a garage. No one was home. I'm on my own. As we pass the driveway, he says something that catches me off guard. His house is about a mile up ahead. I thought his house was a mile from your car.
No, it's a mile from here.
Okay. I keep driving. But look at my odometer. I'm giving him 1 mile. That's it. We drive in silence, for which I'm grateful. He's still fondling my dashboard, but I figure I can ignore that. We go about 3/4 of a mile further up this desolate hollow when I ask him how much further. I think he can tell I'm getting pretty irritated.
Just up that way. Turn right.
I stop in the middle of the abandoned road. He's pointing to a gravel road on my right. It is barely wide enough for my car, and it shoots steeply up the mountain.
He lives a mile up that road. Go that way.
There was no way I was about to drive further into the desolate place when it seemed as if he was making up the directions as he went. There was no sign of life up there, and we had already gone further than he originally said. No, that's as far as we go, I say to him. Get out.
No, come on, man. We're almost there. Just turn up that way.
I looked around, and I have limited options when it comes to a weapon. In fact, I have one option. The previous winter had been a bad one, so I kept a brush/ice scraper combo on my floor. It was plastic, but decently heavy. The scraper part had a sharp edge. I casually picked it up and sat it in my lap. No, get out. He was very reluctant. My makeshift weapon and the fact that I was literally in the driver's seat caused him to swing his door open. The lights instantly came on and he turned to look me squarely in the face. He was grinning, and his teeth looked as if he hadn't seen a dentist since before I was born. This was the first time he said anything with any inflection at all. He said it as if he was trying to sound pitiful, but it came off as mocking. No, I said sternly, and he began to get out of the car. He was in the process of closing the door when he said one more thing. He leaned into the car door window and said,
I really like your car.
He slammed the door and I took off. It was a 1-lane road, so I couldn't immediately go the direction that I needed to. I went up a couple of 100 feet and turned around in someone's driveway. When I approach where I left him out, I see that he has made no progress up the gravel road toward his brother's house. In fact, it doesn't look like he's moved at all. I slow down when I get close to him. I don't want to risk this man jumping in front of me or anything. He stares at me as I pass, and I floored him. As I drive away, I can barely make out that he has started to walk. Not up the mountain, not further into the hollow, but toward the way I had driven, toward the main road. The wrecked car was still there when I drove by, and I went straight home and laid in my bed, too terrified to sleep. I don't know what he had planned, but I'm pretty sure I wasn't driving him to his brother's house.